kids, hope you enjoyed that short movie over Feudal Japan, okay? So today you're going to be listening to me talk about Feudal Japan over this PowerPoint. You can pause it and rewind however you want to, as much as you want to, and then make sure that you are filling out your Japan feudalism notes as we go through this video and PowerPoint. So here we go. All right, the first thing you need to know about ancient Japan is that they did things very similar to China. And the first thing you need to know is that they arranged themselves in clans, kind of like the Mongols did. So clans, and this is the definition you write down on your paper: a group of people who can claim a common ancestor. And you see this picture of the video game Clash of Clans right here. And that's fine if that's how you know about clans, because it's a lot like what happened in ancient Japan. Clans were people who named themselves after their common ancestor and would fight each other constantly for land and resources. So make sure that you are writing the definition of clans down on your paper. Alright, so clans in Japan. Just like we said, throughout ancient Japanese history, they copied a lot of things from the Mongols and from the Chinese, including their ideas of clans. However, like I said, these clans constantly fought each other for power and for family and for land. So around 300 AD, one clan came along that dominated all of the rest of Japan, kind of like 900 years later when Genghis Khan united all of Mongolia. This clan was known as the Yamato Clan. So on your paper, it says the blank clan united all of Japan as one empire. That is the Yamato Clan. And the Yamato Clan was a great clan of warriors. So, name two characteristics of the Yamato Clan. They were excellent warriors. You would have to be to take over all the other clans in Japan at that time. So all the other families began to follow the Yamato Clan as an empire. The next thing you need to know is that they were the first to have an emperor. So you need to write that down. Two characteristics of the Yamato Clan: they were excellent warriors. They were also the first to have an emperor who ruled over all of Japan. Alright, so the Yamato Clan ruled over Japan for roughly 1,000 years. When you think about that, that's crazy. They did so much in that time. They brought in the religion of Confucianism, they brought in the religion of Shintoism and Buddhism, and they copied a number of things from medieval Europe, from China, and they did a lot of crazy things. Now, in 1336, a civil war broke out between the peasants and the samurai. The samurai were the police that protected and served the emperor. So the peasants were sick and tired of being treated so poorly by the samurai that they wanted to attack the emperor. And just like we see with the dynastic cycle, with a number of other places that we'll look at, they wanted to rule over Japan. The samurai put down these peasants because they didn't actually know anything about fighting. The samurai go back to the emperor and they say, hey, we protected you, man. It is now your responsibility to help us out. This whole you ruling over everything and us having no power thing is not working. So the samurai won the Civil War, and then they came up with a different idea. They said, you know what, in Europe they're doing this really crazy thing. It's called feudalism, and everybody's kind of doing it, and we should do it now because this is going to be awesome. So they adapted feudalism as their new form of government in Japan. Okay, so just like we said, feudalism was copied from medieval Europe. This is an example of cultural diffusion, where one culture diffuses itself on another. Feudalism in Japan. The three things that you want to list for characteristics of feudalism on your paper are: the emperor no longer had all the power. Power was now given to selected members of the samurai, which would later become known as shoguns and would lead different amounts of armies to control smaller pieces of land. So the emperor is now nothing but a religious figure. The peasants did all the work. So those three things are what you need to write down on your paper under three characteristics of feudalism in Japan. The emperor no longer had all the power. Feudalism in Japan was a classic version of feudalism. If you take a look at it, this is the triangle that you want to draw on your paper. Much like when we studied Hinduism, society divided itself in a pyramid fashion, where you had the most people down at the bottom, then you had less people as you moved up. So many people in many civilizations around the world were organized in a feudal structure, but medieval Japanese society provides a classic example. And there you see at the top, you see the emperor. Okay, he was the only one at the top, so the pyramid gets smaller as we go up. Next we had the shoguns, the daimyos, the samurai, and the peasants. And we're going to define who each one of those people are here in a second. So this is the chart or the triangle that you want to draw on your paper as it says. The samurai were the military force that served the domyos, okay? The domyos were part of the original selected members of the emperor's army who helped protect him during the Civil War in the 1300s when all these changes took place. Now, these samurai are domyos. Domyos are warriors. They are leaders of a certain army. And the shoguns are leaders of the daimyos. So the emperor, like we said, no longer controlled the armies as the shoguns did. The shoguns warred with each other constantly. In fact, when the Europeans first visited Japan, they referred to the emperor as the pope, or nothing but a religious figure, and the shoguns as the kings of Japan. So everyone in Japan knew that they ultimately served the emperor, but they answered individually to the shoguns. Okay, I hope that makes sense. We have emperor, shogun, Domyo, samurai, peasant. And you see that you're supposed to define each one of those. We'll do that in a second. This is a map of feudal Japan from 1564 to 1573. And you see here all the different daimyos, okay? And you see how the daimyo name is in italics, okay? And that these daimyos with their shoguns or kings warred with each other constantly. While they all answered to an emperor, there were no actual laws except kind of like kill or be killed. So at the bottom of Japanese feudalism on your paper, where it says define the following as you go through the PowerPoint and video, you want to write the lowest level of Japanese feudalism. One of the things that you can write down for the 3 characteristics of peasants is that they were expected to fight when called upon by the daimyo or their shogun. The Japanese peasants served as foot soldiers who did not have any level of training. Because of these deficiencies, peasants died in much higher numbers during the battles. They were seen as being expendable. Okay? They were seen as being not really needed except in battle and to do kind of all the dirty work. So they protected the samurai in battle. 2 other things you can write down on your paper. 1 is that the peasants did all the hard labor and were taxed in exchange for protection from the samurai. Taxes came in the form of food. So they were expected to give a certain amount of food to their samurai, shoguns, and daimyos, and with that amount of food, that's how they pay their taxes. While the samurai get a really good ideas or really good rap in history, they were often really, really cruel to the peasants. Okay, because the peasants had no way to protect themselves, and they lived in fear of the samurai. That was the way feudalism worked. If you were not afraid of the person above you, it wouldn't work. So the next level up the ladder or the triangle of Japanese feudalism is the samurai, the elite military force that protected a daimyo or a shogun, and ultimately protected the emperor. So the samurai were excellent military warriors. And not only did they just kind of sit around all day and practice with their katanas or swords, but they wore armor, which had to be sewn together from the skin of monkeys, bamboos, and leather to make and it could take over a year to make their armor. They got the idea for the armor from medieval Europe and the knights that protected the castles of feudal lords in medieval Europe. So again, an example of not only Japan wanting to do things on their own, but also cultural diffusion. So the daimyo, that is Japan's land-owning class who controls groups of samurai. So the daimyos were essentially like generals in an army. and they were given land as payment. So to protect their land, they had peasants working on them. Okay? Japanese feudalism, the shogun, is essentially like the kings were in Europe. They protected the entire clan region. Okay? They protected the different domyos. So ultimately, the generals or domyos answer to a king or a shogun. They protected their kingdom against other shoguns, and ultimately, Japanese feudalism surrounded itself around an emperor, a supreme ruler and spiritual leader. This guy over here, this emperor was the final emperor of Japanese feudal society in World War II. We're actually going to watch a movie about him called The Last Samurai with Tom Cruise in it, and you guys are going to look at the different ideas of American and Japanese society. So I hope you enjoyed this lecture. I know that listening to me on video is probably even more exciting than listening to me in person, and that you guys have a ton of questions for me. You need to answer the 3 questions down below. You also need to go into your DBW and fill out the L section of your KWL chart, what you learned from this video, and then turn in your DBW to Edmodo. Have yourselves a great weekend, and I will see you on Monday.